You ever wonder why so many inner cities across America look the way they do today? It wasn't by accident. It was actually the result of policies, prejudice, and profits. Today, we are unpacking the history of urban decay and white flight and how they reshaped Black communities forever. Now, when you look at abandoned buildings, struggling schools, and underfunded communities, it's easy to think it just happened, but it didn't. It was all part of a long history of systematic decisions that moved wealth out of Black communities while trapping Black families in cycles of poverty. Let's talk about the roots of urban decay post-World War II. Now, after World War II, America experienced an economic boom, but while the suburbs were thriving, inner cities began to decline. Why? Because of intentional policies. From the 1930s to the 1960s, the federal government literally drew red lines around Black neighborhoods, marking them as high risks for home loans. Now, this made it nearly impossible for Black families to buy homes, build wealth, or access to credit. This is redlining. Now, let's talk about the GI Bill. While it helped many white veterans buy homes and go to college, Black veterans were often denied these benefits due to discrimination at the local level. Now let's talk about discriminatory housing practices. Racial covenants in housing deeds legally prevented Black families from buying homes in certain neighborhoods. Real estate agents engaged in blockbusting, convincing white homeowners to sell cheap by stroking fear that Black families would move in. Urban decay wasn't the result of bad luck, it was the result of bad policy. Now, from the 1950s to the 1960s, as the civil rights movement pushed for integration, white flight was accelerated. White families fled cities like Detroit, Chicago, and Philadelphia for newly developed all-white suburbs. They took with them the tax dollars, investments, and political power, leaving urban centers starved for resources. Meanwhile, Black families were often trapped in these neighborhoods because of discriminatory housing practices and lack of economic mobility. And what happened to the neighborhoods? The schools deteriorated because they were funded by local property taxes, which disappeared with white flight. Businesses closed, jobs vanished, and public services declined. This created the urban decay we see today, decades in the making. Now, the legacy of urban decay and white flight is still visible today. We have underfunded schools. Majority Black districts receive less funding than white suburban districts. We have generational wealth gaps. Black families were locked out of home ownership, the primary source of wealth in America. And then we have gentrification. Now that urban land is valuable again, Black communities are being displaced by the very system that once abandoned them. History didn't just happen back then. It's happening right now. Urban decay and white flight weren't accidents. They were outcomes of deliberate choice. Now, if you learned something new, drop a Black fist in the comments and share this with someone who needs to understand how deep this history runs.